All right.
If I wanted fungus, I'll go scrape it off.
All right, 6 p.m. We'll call the public hearing to order. The purpose of this public hearing is to take any questions or concerns related to the 2041 comprehensive plan for the Village of Chatham. Is there anyone that would like to speak in the public hearing as it relates to the comprehensive plan? Hearing none, public hearing will come to a close. This time I call the village board meeting to order. If you'd all please join me in a moment of silence. And a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Clerk, would you take a roll?
Trustee Mao.
Present.
Trustee Ferguson.
Present.
Trustee Charo.
Present.
Trustee Detmers. Here. Trustee Gerger.
Present.
Trustee Scherschel.
Here.
President Kimsey.
Present. Any public announcements?
Couple of things. We're planning on lighting up the memorial this year. We got a committee going on that, so kind of watch for that in the next few weeks. I think the 20th, I think it is, we're planning on decorating it, so looking forward to that. And kind of watch the Clarion and Facebook and Chatham Central. The VFW is hoping to have their soft opening on Veterans Day. So we'll see.
Thank you, Liz. Any other public announcements? Any public comment on agenda topics? Hearing none, entertain a motion to put the consent agenda on the table.
Make that motion.
Trustee Mao has made a motion with a second.
Second.
Second by Trustee Charo.
I'd like to make a motion to strike the landmark Ford charges totaling $48,946.
Who have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any further discussion on the warrants or the minutes? Hearing none, Mr. Clerk?
Trustee Mao.
Yes.
Trustee Ferguson.
Yes.
Trustee Charo.
Yes.
Trustee Detmers.
Yes.
Trustee Gerger.
Yes.
Trustee Scherschel.
Yes.
Go slightly out of order here. Let's take items 2 and 3 kind of in recognition that we had somebody that drove all the way down from Bloomington. So in consideration of the drive back, we'll take those items first. These are an ordinance approving a zoning amendment and an ordinance approving a variance for the same property. Trustee Mordock, Attorney Mordock, would you like to explain where we're at in this process?
Congratulations, Greg.
Or condolences. So we had public hearings based on our motions to apply for a zoning amendment and a variance at the corner of Plummer and Ravina. We filed petitions after we had the meeting, if you recall, where we requested zoning to go from B1 to R3, and then also requested a variance on the property on the bulk use requirements to go from 3,500 square feet, one dwelling unit per 3,500 square feet to one dwelling unit per 2,914 feet. So the Zoning Board of Appeals met last Thursday, and they voted unanimously to approve the zoning change. They then looked at the variance and discussed the reduction in the bulk use. There was a motion made on the floor to approve the variance. That motion did not receive a second, so it failed to carry. There was then a prolonged period of silence, and followed by no recommendation either way from the board. The Zoning Board of Appeals chose not to act on on making a recommendation to the board.
Did they have discussion prior to the motion regarding it?
Yes, they did.
And do we know what that discussion was?
I was not at that meeting.
Okay.
So I do not know exactly what it was. They came to no findings of fact regarding the actual variance requirements under our code. So they sent it to this to the village board with no recommendation. So the village board still has authority under the municipal code to act on this item. The zoning board of appeals did hold a public hearing in accordance with the municipal code and in accordance with our ordinances. So while we don't have findings of fact to present to the board today, the board can choose, if it wants to approve, deny, or remand the variance.
Did they vote to send it to us?
They closed their public hearing,
Okay.
and they did not adjourn it for future consideration. They believe that this item.
So the only one they really sent to us would be the one that moved it from the R to the B or the B to the R. Does that automatically come to us?
Well, no, they made a recommendation to go to that, and I think by not making a recommendation one way or another, but adjourning the public hearing, that then takes it out of their hands and moves it to this board.
Okay.
So in absence of that report that you would normally see on a variance request, our professional engineer is here to provide the kind of the technical explanation of what those components are, and what our consulting engineer, how he views that and how he reviews that. So, Jim?
Okay, so I have a couple of items here I want to discuss. I, as well, was not at the meeting. It was presented that the meeting was, pretty standard mundane meeting that did not require my expertise at that, but lo and behold, here I am tonight discussing the same items. So, one of the things that it afforded me was the opportunity to dig into this a little bit more and take a look at the items at hand and, I guess formalize my thoughts and opinions from an engineering standpoint regarding the motions carried forward and to be voted on by you guys tonight. First of all, the one item is the zoning change from E1 back to R3. Now, that's a down zoning and reflects a more restrictive use of the property going from commercial to multifamily residential. That's one thing that they recommended. I have no issues with that. It's appropriate to the properties adjacent to it and the land use out there. So from an engineering standpoint, infrastructure standpoint, that makes sense to me. The other one regarded the bulk use requirements, and this was a little bit interesting in the fact that we don't run across that all that often in terms of the bulk use requirements prevailing in these situations, but it is a requirement in the ordinance. And basically what the bulk use requirements is it establishes a square footage of property per unit of housing to be used for the property. And as Mayor Kimsey said, the requirement is 3,500 and we're at
914.
Yeah, 2914. So, so when I looked at that and looked at the requirements, I felt that in my review of this, the bulk requirements were a little bit duplicative in terms of the village's ordinances as well. So when you look at the bulk requirements, it is an issue of what is it trying to convey or try to present, or what is it trying to control. And under standard ordinances, It's really a height restriction to make sure that properties aren't built multi-level towers on small properties and don't have the footprint to support that. Now, with the village's ordinances, there are requirements for setbacks, there are requirements for parking, requirements for green space, detention, access, traffic management, public facilities such as sidewalk and so forth. So all of those items I went through and checked, and those all meet ordinance. So you have the bulk requirement, and then you have all the additional requirements that kind of feed into that bulk requirement. So going through and checking that, I have no issues from a professional engineering standpoint that this property would be, damaged in a certain way as a result of an ordinance change or a variation of, this requirement. So, looking at that, all of these items are met. The other thing that I looked at really is the fact that this property is already in a platted subdivision. So being in a platted subdivision, a lot of your common space areas, detention areas, floodplain, green space areas are already being met by the subdivision as a whole. So when we look at the bulk use to me portrays a use for a single property, okay? So if this was a standalone parcel being platted by itself and having those requirements, then the bulk use would have, in my mind, more of a standing associated with meeting those requirements, because you would still have to have the additional parking, you'd still have to have the detention, you'd still have to have your green spaces that are being provided elsewhere and adjacent to this parcel within this larger subdivision. And the reason why we do subdivisions is efficient use of the properties throughout that development. So not every home has to have its own retention pond. Not every home has to have its green space. Not every home has to have all of the requirements of the subdivision, that those can be consolidated and provided elsewhere. So when I look at this for the bulk space, my concern were that the primary features were being met. Do we have ample parking? Do we have handicap parking? Do we have ample access to the site? Actually, the site provides connection to the, or plan to provide connection to the parcel adjacent to it, and provides continuity for traffic or emergency access through this site. It does not produce or induce a undue stress on the street system. The street system and facilities are there, were developed to accommodate this parcel. So there's really no item in there that I take exception to, with the exception of the bulk requirement. Now, if we look at the overall subdivision, the adjacent green areas that are there, the detention facilities that provide it, and take a, percentage of ownership of those green areas relative to that parcel, then you would meet your bulk requirement.
Could you repeat that, please?
If you took the percentage of open green areas in that subdivision, floodplain, detention areas, you would meet your...
Do the empty lots fill into that green space? Are you calculating the empty lots in that subdivision as green?
I'm counting the 1,000 lots, not empty lots, developable lots. I'm talking open area lots. So based on the percentage of those lots, or the percentage of that lot of the overall subdivision, if you accounted for those open areas contributing their portions to that lot, you would meet your bulk requirements percentages for that subdivision, or for that requirement for this lot. So it's not provided within the lot itself, but it's provided as a whole within the subdivision. But as I said, there's nothing in here in terms of the requirements that I feel from an engineering standpoint is detrimental to the Village of Chatham moving forward. But, that's your vote for tonight.
You brought up parking. Has a fire chief been consulted? Is this a single entrance area?
Single entrance off of Ravinia.
Yeah, so it's a single entrance exit, so has the fire chief been consulted on whether or not that's an issue? Because I know in my neighborhood, when there was a development and we discussed putting a cul-de-sac, the fire chief, after the plans were put in place, the fire chief came to this meeting and said that was a huge problem. We shouldn't have single entrance exits areas, and asked the board to turn it down, which, upset my neighborhood because it's done without really notifying us, and they kept the plans as is. But, I don't know if that's something that's been vetted by the village administration, because that was a concern by them at that time.
That I'm not sure.
Okay.
So Jim, you mentioned kind of on that, it doesn't change any of the traffic flow or access from your engineering perspective, correct?
Correct. The roadways and facilities that are out there can accommodate that type of improvement.
And currently out there, the accesses to all those lots are single, and even the one that is under consideration, the very preliminary at this point, because they haven't gone through any plan review processes, because that's not at that step. Even that contemplates actually connecting the two, so that there's two entrances to a.
It does provide connection to the facility to the south. They have a single entrance, and then this unit would have a single entrance, but they connect internally to the two properties to provide a loop as planned.
Jim, this isn't a question necessarily for you, but in the ordinance for the zoning, it says that whereas on October 26th, the Zoning Board of Appeals presented its findings to the corporate authorities of the village. And I know you referenced that. I haven't seen any findings.
Village Administrator Crawford has, zoning officer Crawford has the findings of fact for the ordinance for the zoning change. Those findings of fact have not been distributed yet. We're looking at both of these together, and depending on how the variance goes, we should probably have a discussion on whether or not we would like to proceed on that ordinance. If the board chooses to look at both the variance and the rezoning, then we're prepared to distribute those findings of fact.
Say that again?
Sure. We can make copies and hand you the findings of fact. We have them here if you want.
I guess normally when these have come to us, it's just been a separate attachment for us to see before we come in to be prepared to make a vote, to actually have the information. So I don't know why it's kind of, you can have it after the fact. That seems odd to me.
I don't think it was finished until today, that the findings of fact were finalized until today.
Okay. It just seems like it's normally a separate, it's like an exhibit A that's along with the ordinance for us to review.
That is typically how it's done, as far as I can recall. But is it true that the proposed drawings of the apartments could be redrawn such that they don't violate the variance, or they don't require the variance for bulk use? Isn't it, like, I don't know exactly how many units are proposed to being built. I don't think that we've seen that yet. But if there were 20, could it be that they build only 18 and then thus fall under the need for a variance request?
The formula we used was he was going to build 3 6-unit, so it was a total of 18. So we took the square footage of the parcel and divided it by 18 and come up that we were short 35 from the 3,500 that we required.
More than 15% outside of the variance. I just wonder, could you do 3 sets of 5 units? And would that then satisfy the square footage requirement?
I think when we ran the numbers, Ryan, wasn't it 14? 14 units would fall within that. But that's hard to build 2 7-unit buildings.
They're wanting to build 18, so 4 units in addition to.
Correct.
Well, they want to build 3 6-units.
Yeah. And that's caused the request for the variance.
So the answer to that one, it could be built, I mean, it might be a little bit extra, but it could be built.
I actually don't think that's an appropriate question
No.
for Jim to be put on the spot to answer.
I'm just,
We do, I mean, and it's Elizabeth, is that correct?
That is correct.
Elizabeth is here, who is representation for the potential buyer at this point in time. So Elizabeth, if you would like to speak to the nature of the request, to the extent that you want to and take questions, the microphone is certainly available for you.
Jim.
Certainly. I certainly, we are in early phases of actually looking at plans, but I can tell you that the proposal that has been submitted, that has been under consideration, is what's economically feasible for this project. And so certainly, I would say absolutely, you could build a single unit on this property if you wanted to and wouldn't have to worry about any of it, but it wouldn't be an economically feasible project for my client. So I think to make this project feasible, it needs to have the 18 units, and that was really why we requested that. We don't believe that it really changes the outward look of this area, and it appears consistent with the other development surrounding it. Again, I can't really talk to specifics because we haven't gotten that far, in hopes that we cross this bridge before we got to the really expensive engineering phases, but we have gotten you some preliminary ideas so you had an idea what you were working with. But I can take any other questions.
were you at the zoning board of appeals meeting on Thursday? Or did anybody representing your client attend?
No, sir.
Thank you.
That was a good clarification, thanks, because that is one of the things with changing this over to our residential. You do need to have the proper zoning to justify 18 units.
Yeah, so to make sure that we're clear on this, Elizabeth represents a potential buyer. The request came from the village on property that the village owns. Given a set of circumstances, as she's described, the proper zoning and the associated variance, there is an offer to acquire the property. And I don't want to speak for your client, but as you say, not economically viable, that seems to insinuate that absent those circumstances, that offer is not there, or at least not in its current form.
That would be my impression and understanding that what was proposed made this a viable project, that my client's not necessarily interested in purchasing property for the sake of holding property if it can't be developed in a way that's economically beneficial.
So if I get this right, and I've gotten things wrong once or twice, but if I get this right, and we approve these, there's an offer on the table to purchase this. And that will take this property and put it on the tax rolls, correct? It'll put it on the village, it'll put it up, because currently, since it's owned by the village government, it's not on any tax rolls. Am I right or am I wrong?
There's no real estate tax on government property.
So then it would be put on various tax rolls then. And then what's built on it would improve the value, and
Correct.
the county taxes, school taxes, so and so.
Correct.
And more utility customers and on and on.
Correct.
Any other questions?
Did anyone have any other questions for Elizabeth? We do appreciate you making
Yes, thank you.
the drive.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Jim, I did have a question for you. In your dealing as an engineer, is it unique to you to see a request made in this fashion, where a potential buyer has requested the current owner to seek a zoning change and a variance prior to a transaction?
No, typically, a lot of times this is the way that it's done to ensure risk management moving forward, because if the sale of the property is contingent upon a particular use of the property, there's no guarantee or there's no assurances that the property can be used as future intended. So A lot of times we will see changes made beforehand, before the sale and transaction of it. So with the village owning the property at this point, with a prospective buyer in hand, then moving forward, whether it be the village or a private entity, pursuing a change that would be beneficial as the current property owner for the future, that is not, unheard of or unrealistic or, rare occasion. That's actually quite common.
As it is, is there one property that doesn't meet our bulk requirement that doesn't have the variance?
What is that?
Is there a property that's over there that's current that doesn't meet our bulk variance?
That I'm not aware of.
Okay.
My concern,
There is one. There was, of the three that have apartments on it, two of them meet the bulk requirement and one of them exceeds it by a small amount.
Was that variance granted by the board or just wasn't brought up at the time?
I don't know that. That was put in, do you remember how long ago those apartments went in? I do not. Do you, Ryan?
I don't either.
Over 10 years ago. It was a different administration, different board,
Sure. Just
different staff.
When you say small, do you know how much the variance is?
Do you have your number there?
Yep. Give me a second to dig through this growing folder.
Do you have the map that you were going to pull up? This is the piece they got rezoned, and they're asking for a variance. Okay.
We're looking to rezone.
Yes.
This piece meets the bulk requirement. This piece meets the bulk requirement. This one was short on the bulk requirement.
Yeah, 001.
Okay.
That was what it was, and that's what it needs to be, so about
So it was-
2,500 square feet.
Okay. This is 60,457 square feet, and it needed to be 63,000.
Is that backwards?
No,
So,
Based on the number of units, it needed to be that size, but it wasn't that big, 2,500
The
square feet.
parcel needed to be 2,553 more square feet.
so in cases where we find out that somebody doesn't comply with an ordinance, a variance, or whatever zoning wise, what happens?
Well, if it's in certain circumstances, if, for example, if somebody's operating a business in violation in a residential area in violation of the zoning code, we would
Shut the business down.
yeah, we'd file an ordinance violation. We'd send them notice. In this particular case, we would go back and see, one, if there were any promises made or any discussion that was had to see why this was allowed. And I think we'd be facing some pretty stiff affirmative defenses like latches for not enforcing our ordinance since those were put in, which has been quite a long time.
Yeah, just checking.
is that something that needs to be determined?
It's part of the reason why we asked for, the request went in for the zoning change, the request went in for the variance. We see, often you see errors of the past creep up and stick there, and it's been the intention to not duplicate those errors and ask for things correctly. So hence this zoning variance. So
Do we know what discussion was had among the zoning board? Because you look up the minutes, it just says discussion. It doesn't, there's nothing specific.
And and quite honestly,
From the meeting the other night, or
Yeah.
from the one that they're talking about when the variance was not given, or?
The meeting
previous
the other
one.
night.
No, it's just straight discussion, and there was no recording of it.
So we don't have a clue if they had questions or what questions they had on that.
Or what was discussed. There's nobody here that was.
I think what says something to me from my point of view is someone made a motion and no one was even willing to make a second. That to me makes a statement in and of itself. And that's my concern. If our zoning board, which was very clear, that's the role they play. Now granted, it ultimate authority and the decision is made at the village board, but the zoning board of appeals has that role to vet these things for the village board, and only one person decided to move that forward. There wasn't even a second, so they couldn't even get a vote. So that's a statement.
And it's weird they have the discussion prior to the motion. Like, we always make a motion, bring it to the table, then we discuss, and then we vote.
Like I'd make a motion right now to strike down the variance. Because, for that reason.
I'll second.
I would suggest not preempting the discussion, especially as your attorney was about to weigh in with professional opinion.
I was just going to comment on, as this motion just evidenced, the item was brought to the floor, there was discussion, and there was a motion, just like what just happened with ordinances 2 and 3. So it was presented, we opened up the public hearing, then there was discussion, the petition was presented, there was discussion amongst the board, and there was a motion brought. So it's not like there wasn't a motion to bring it to the table.
Okay.
We did open the public hearing.
Yeah, so in a similar vein to what you're talking about, with no second, at no point was there either a motion, there wasn't a motion made to deny, nor was there a second to that motion that wasn't made. So what the Zoning Board of Appeals...
There was a motion to recommend without a second.
And there was no recommendation to deny, which is...
But I'm saying there was a motion to recommend, but no second.
Correct.
So, so there wasn't even, just like in here, if I just made a motion to deny the variance, if I wouldn't have had a second, that motion couldn't go forward. So that means my fellow board members don't support that motion. It couldn't even get a vote.
And they could have made a motion to deny, which was not done.
I think we're splitting hairs and trying to play semantics with that.
We do have a motion here, though.
Yeah.
And we're currently having discussion on...
Exactly.
But I'm saying, I think that's just semantics. I think trying to change how you look at something on a wall, it's anyone's interpretation from that point of view, but.
True. And absent of that recommendation and those types of findings, your engineers presented the aspects of the findings. So your professional consulting engineer has given his analysis of the area as it relates to the terms of those variances. Your attorney has described where you are in the process and that it is ultimately the board's responsibility. And I would caution again and restate the fact that what we have right now is an offer to acquire a parcel given a set of circumstances, and those circumstances being these 2 items. Absent those, and voting either of those down, I cannot guarantee you that there is an offer. Correct? I cannot make that. I can't say that. I don't. And Elizabeth is shaking her head no. She wouldn't say that either, I think is how I'm reading that.
That is correct. I certainly have no indication from my client that they will move forward without these items.
And also, why wouldn't the findings of fact be presented to the board for us to consider along with this? Just like we have for every other zoning board motion that's come forward with this as an Exhibit A along with the ordinance.
The Zoning Board of Appeals made no findings of fact as to the variance.
Okay.
We have findings of fact related to the ordinance. Those are 2 separate items.
Right.
There were no findings of fact made for the variance.
Is there a possibility to go back to the zoning board?
That possibility does exist.
Because I would feel more comfortable if we had an actual response from the zoning board, whether it be a yes, no, or a reason why they didn't move it forward.
We do have the chair of the zoning board is here. If you'd like to ask him a process question or let him weigh in. This is Ryan Vaughn, for those that don't know him. Ryan is the chair of the zoning board of appeals.
Just all right. Continue.
Right. We'd have to vote on both.
Were you at the meeting?
No, unfortunately, because of some travel commitments, I could not make the meeting. I believe it was originally scheduled for this week, and would have been able to. But yeah, unfortunately, last week I couldn't make it. So I didn't know if I should just sort of start talking a little bit. But I since the meeting, I've actually I've had time to review the minutes and the finding of fact for the rezoning. And I think the reason I'm here tonight and what I wanted to bring up, the concern that I have is kind of what you were talking about, Trustee Churchill, is that so our board really has a pretty simple role. It's to review the petition, it's to hear testimony, and it's to weigh all of that against the conditions and whether or not they're met. But most importantly, it's to take action of some sort. I actually ran into this when I first joined the board a long time ago before I was chairman, where we had a similar situation and no action was taken. And the concern that I had then, the concern that I have now is sort of, I think, what sort of generated your comment, Trustee Churchill, which is that absent a recommendation from us, you're left to guess. You're left to guess what our intent was. I think maybe if there were concerns about it at all, that is not a reason, in my estimation, to not call it to a vote of some sort. Normally it's pretty simple. We either call it, I'll entertain a motion to approve, I'll entertain a motion to deny. It's pretty cut and dry, one of those two. So to take no action, I fear ties your hands in a way and doesn't actually leave you with the information you need to make an informed decision. So that was kind of the concern that I had just reviewing all this. Again, it was not there. I don't have really any insight necessarily into what other board members were thinking necessarily. But the no action thing just kind of bothers me a bit because that's our single purpose is to give you something to work with so that you can make an informed vote. So yeah, that's kind of why I came tonight. I just wanted to bring that up. So
Thank you, Ryan. Have you spoken to any of the zoning board of appeals members since the no action on Thursday?
I have been in an email conversation, just a little bit back and forth with some comments out there about it.
Did they share their concerns with you? Because I've asked a few people in attendance, and there seemed to be a significant discussion about those concerns. And I realized that they weren't written down and formally submitted to us, but those conversations were had, and those concerns were mentioned, and it didn't seem as though they were resolved. And that's why, from what I understand, there wasn't really a recommendation either way, because they understood that the village wanted this done. They had some concerns about it, and they said, hey, I think it's better that we just don't answer than to potentially offer a suggestion that the village isn't interested in, or doesn't appreciate, or isn't seeking.
Sure. I do have a little bit of insight into their concerns, and I'll just, like you said, Trustee Detmers, I'll caution that none of this is in the minutes necessarily. It's just based on my conversation with them. I think there were two concerns. One was that the village shouldn't actually be the petitioner, and that's just wrong because
Agreed.
The only person that can petition is the owner. So there's no.
We are the owner.
Right. Exactly.
So that's why we petitioned.
So that can't.
But we're not building multi-use
We're not building,
apartments.
it's our.
But it's our property. We're trying to get it rezoned, so
And they
it
didn't
can't be
represent
done.
themselves
They
to
were-
explain.
No, it's not necessary. They don't own it.
If
We
you were to
do.
go before the zoning board of appeals and say, hey, look, we want to move this thing or make this thing different, then their first question should be, why? Why are you wanting to remodel this thing? And the answer is,
What is the zoning around it?
what?
What is the zoning around it?
I'm talking about the variance.
So am I.
They don't have the variance around it.
So what I'm saying is, we are the petitioner. We should be the ones petitioning for
Well, you asked what the zoning around it was. They don't have the bull.
I just stated we should be the petitioner.
I understand
That's
that
it.
we own the property.
That's right.
What I'm saying is, it's odd to me that as we own the property, we can go before the zoning board of appeals and say, hey, look, we want to change this. What are your plans to change it? No, we don't really have any plans to change it, but somebody else does. Oh, okay, are they here to explain it? No.
And I don't know that it's the village's responsibility to do so. We're asking for a variance.
Okay,
change
let's call the vote.
to make it more appealing.
Well, I'm not ready. I want to hear the second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Chairman.
Sorry, sir.
My understanding is that the owner needs to be the petitioner, and if there can be no
Sure.
exception to that. The second reason given was, I believe that they had an issue possibly with condition A, right? Okay. Frankly, I read it, personally disagree, but again, those two combined might be reasons, let's say, to call it for a motion to deny. They are not reasons to take no action.
What was the second, the A? Yeah, what was that?
A is that it would not yield a reasonable return on investment.
A reasonable return on investment? Okay.
Yeah, there's the reasonable return, there's the uniqueness of the situation, and there's, I apologize, I can't remember the other one.
So maybe they can't fill 18 units and turn a profit.
Yeah, and I will say, just for maybe a little bit more insight into how our board operates, there's a point in time when you're hearing this testimony, and oftentimes it's relatively short, where you kind of just have to trust what you're hearing. None of us are experts on land acquisition or what is or is not feasibly. I would struggle with asking someone directly or with challenging someone who is an expert in what it's going to cost and whether or not it's economically feasible, and actually, challenging them on that. I would struggle with doing that myself, and I don't. I often don't. I try to ask the questions that I think are very pertinent, but when it comes to something like that, you hit a point where you just kind of have to trust the testimony that you're hearing and weigh it against.
Who provided
I
that testimony?
appreciate that trust, and sorry to cut you off, but I do appreciate the trust, and you all know very well that I trust the Zoning Board of Appeals to make the decisions. And I told every member of this board that I wanted you guys to hear it, and I wanted you to provide your feedback. And that Zoning Board of Appeals, the majority, right? The majority of that group was there. They heard it. They sent a message.
Oh, and I would disagree. I think no message was sent.
Exactly.
I agree.
Now, who provided I know you weren't there, but who provided the testimony for this?
I have the minutes from the hearing.
I have a question. Can you name another circumstance where they didn't come back with a resolution or recommendation?
No, well, the only other time was, and I honestly, it escapes me how long I've been on the board, but I had not been on it. It might have been my first or second meeting, and we ran into this situation, and where it was, and I don't remember if it was called for a motion to approve or a motion to deny, but there was no second, and it just sat there, and I was kind of, because I was new, I was looking around like, well, what happens now? And to me, it always rang as a procedural error of some sort, that for lack of a better way to explain it, that nobody knew what to do, which sometimes happens when you have a collection of newer members on a board, and I think at that time we might have had a couple newer people, but that's the only time that I can remember since I've been on the board. Every other time we have provided some sort of recommendation to the board.
So of the 5 members that were there that night, could you give us some idea of their tenure on the board?
I could not.
The reason why I asked that is, was it their first meeting, or had they been on the board before?
I know we've had a couple of new ones recently.
Jeff Emmerich is the newest member of the board.
And he chaired the meeting that night.
Yes, because.
So Jeff chaired the meeting.
Do it. Who had chaired meetings before.
It was a game of gotcha. You're up. You're chairing it.
It wasn't fun. So do we need some new appointments, or what's
that?
Do we need some new appointments to fix that
I appreciate those that are appointed and that attended. I
One
appreciate
question,
that.
though, I do have one question. You mentioned earlier that you weren't there, that the meeting was scheduled for this week instead of last week.
I think maybe it originally was. I'm not sure.
Do we know why it was changed back last week? Okay.
Do you think it was a procedural error?
Last week was the date that
I'm
was
sorry.
publicized.
Do you think it was a procedural
The
error?
public notice.
Okay.
It's hard for me to say.
It wasn't there, so.
I wasn't there. I can only tell you that I don't know if I was in the seat I normally would have been in. I don't think I would have let that occur. I think I would have just said, "Hey guys, we got to do something here. We got to call it some sort of conclusion," because I'm about putting something in front of you where your hands aren't tied and you're left guessing at what we intended. That's just a nightmare scenario as far as I'm concerned. So,
Thank Thank
answer your
you.
question, everybody's been on the board at least 4 years, except for Jeff Emmerich, who is the newest member, and he just came on board, and that was his second meeting.
Okay,
He
so
came on in 2021.
And he
The other
got,
four have
he
been
got
there
shoved
forever.
into trying to chair a meeting that
Works
he's
for
only
him.
been to one other one. No, it was painful.
I mean, it's, you guys have been on meetings, I'm probably speaking out of turn here, but it's one of those things, because I sat right here and I watched him, and he was like, I don't want to do this, and I'm like, oh, no, you're fine, we'll get you, you know, and it was, he did the best he could, and it's a hard spot to be in, because he is new, and, you know, so I feel bad for him, but I also know that I think when you were asking as well about questions and whatnot, it was pretty free flowing, and, you know, I was trying to write stuff down, but keep it germane to what was going on, so
But there really was not a lot of discussion.
no, I mean,
It was mostly people just staring at each other.
there was a lot of that.
It sounds procedural to me. It sounds like maybe the second just was somehow they moved beyond it.
No.
The
Oh, no,
motion was
it was
made.
there.
They did everything in the right steps.
It was floating around, and then they grabbed it.
Well, I mean, because if you've had people on it for 4 years, I mean,
Yeah.
one of us are, yeah.
They knew what was going on.
It's also a board that doesn't get to frequently practice its craft.
We actually amended out in 2021 than we have any other year.
It's true, but prior to that, you're right, maybe once a year, twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is there any other questions for Chairman Bond? Appreciate it, right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, yes.
If I might, and I get the impression that there's some concern that my client didn't appear at the planning and zoning meeting and that we should have. And that for some reason we intentionally did not place ourselves in that position. Please be advised that was not at all the intention. We were not aware that our attendance was necessary. I attend meetings like this all the time. I travel to meetings all the time. My client has no intention of trying to avoid being, providing information to appropriate bodies. We were, under these circumstances, it wasn't thought that it would be needed for us to be present, and so we were not. But I do think it's very fair to know that I do not anticipate us moving forward if we cannot resolve these issues.
I appreciate that clarification. And just to clarify my stance, it wasn't that I expected anyone to be there, but I did have some hesitation amongst this board that it's hard for us to relay the intent of the project if we're not the ones that intend to do it. We didn't draw it. We don't plan to build it or make any profits from it. And so while I understand that we're the legal owner of the land and that the petition has to be made in our name, I think that it was my understanding that the Zoning Board of Appeals would be interested to understand the intent in order to provide the proper guidance that I was seeking, because being in the financial realm, I don't know setbacks and variances and all these things that are being discussed amongst that commission. And I explained to this board and that I would look to that Zoning Board of Appeals for advice. So I think it was pretty necessary to have somebody representing the plans.
My question relates to the zoning board, gentlemen. His second concern, whether or not you could fill 18 units. Does your client believe that he can fill the units and provide the taxes, the property taxes and the electric usage?
Without question. I mean,
That wasn't what was said, it was return on investment, not the capability to build it.
No, the return on investment is the rents and the electric and the property taxes. That's the return for the village.
I think with all due respect to the concerns that were potentially raised by planning and zoning, we would not propose a project. We would not entertain a potential of buying a piece of land if we did not think there was a return on the investment. Without a return on the investment, I get to refer them to bankruptcy lawyers and I no longer get to earn my fee. So I don't like that. So no, there is absolutely the belief that there would be a return on investment with the project that's being proposed. Ironically, the current bulk use requirements are the scenario in which we don't feel like we have an appropriate return on investment.
So you think those 3 units make that big of a difference in that property?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? So there is currently a motion and a second to deny the variance. I would suggest, based on the conversation and kind of the angst and concern that I've heard, Trustee Churchill, it may be worthwhile to amend that motion and refer it back to the zoning board with the direction from the board to be, please analyze this, provide a finding of fact for these items, and provide a recommendation from the zoning board.
Which is what we've already asked.
Well, yeah, I just feel like it'll be Groundhog Day and we're wasting everybody's time if we do that. We've been in that scenario before where there was a situation that's been several years where we voted and then someone, a board member asked to reconsider, send it back to the zoning board. And then it came back to us. We still voted it down. I think it's like 2 or 3 times and it's still the same thing. And it made me feel bad for all the parties involved and the time wasted. So, and I think as been articulated by Trustee Detmers and the chairman, I think it's strange for the village board to send something for a property that we own, but are advocating for a use that we're not going to do. And then they don't make any recommendation, send it to us. We're like, no, we're going to send it back to you. And I think it becomes a ping pong match. I think it's one of those you got to, move or get off the pot, So I think I'm going to leave my motion as is, unless the second would like to change.
I'm good with second.
So I would, again, caution, disagree with this assessment. You've heard quite clearly from counsel of a potential buyer that absent those considerations, it's going to be there. If the angst associated with it is you actually would like a report, I believe Chairman Vaughn's kind of stated eloquently how he views the zoning board, and they would meet again on the 4th where this could be considered and get to what it is you're asking for to actually make that determination. Your professional engineer has provided all of his consulting advice, his engineering advice on how the criteria meets a technical.
Was that provided to the zoning board? No, I get that he said he wasn't, so I don't know why. I guess
It was provided to us.
So here's
but it's supposed to go through the zoning board.
It's to us.
Here's the
You
spot.
voted against the zoning board before.
Trustee Mount.
I know you have.
Trustee Mount, hold on. Based on the reasonings for the zoning or the variance request and based on that criteria, it was actually miscalculated how difficult it would be. And so in respect of Jim's time, in respect of the fact that anytime we invite Jim or Greg into a meeting, there's a cost associated with that. So you don't have a recommendation one way or the other. And that's just where it is, period. If you would like them to fully get that, have the opportunity to talk to Jim, and I think, Elizabeth, if I understand you correctly, based on what you've heard today, you would probably attend that one as well.
I have no reason to believe I would not attend that.
So those opportunities for the Zoning Board of Appeals to hear that in a different fashion and, with the guidance from the board that says we would like a recommendation and we would like a finding of fact, is a valid request at this point in time. A flat rejection and denial of that variance request at this point in time, I think, ends any discussion on, as Trustee Mao said, taking a untaxed parcel and putting it into a taxable, viable use.
The parcel that we're being asked to take the bare minimum legally allowed of its value, in addition to other exceptions being made.
I don't think that's a correct assessment, given the nature of the law.
We have the vote, and it could go down, and
with nothing offered to the contrary here, and a motion is second on the table. This vote is to deny the variance, the bulk use requirement. Any further discussion? So a yes is a vote to deny. Mr. Clerk?
Trustee Mao.
No.
Trustee Ferguson.
Yes.
Trustee Charo.
No.
Trustee Detmers.
Yes.
Trustee Gerger.
Yes.
Trustee Churchill.
Yes.
I would entertain a motion to remove the request for zoning change from consideration at this point in time. Changing that zoning absent the variance is contrary to the village's best interest, so I would suggest a motion to remove that from the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
We have a second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Back to item one. Item one is an ordinance adopting the Village of Chatham 2041 Comprehensive Plan. We have a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Trustee Ferguson has made a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I would like to take an opportunity to thank our volunteer steering committee for the effort that they put forth over a long time and a lot of work and a lot of data and a lot of pages that they poured over to get to the point where we have this comprehensive plan update in front of us, as well as all those that participated along the way in the form of surveys and public forums. Any further discussion? Hearing none?
Trustee Charo.
Yes.
Trustee Detmers.
Yes.
Trustee Ferguson.
Yes.
Trustee Gerger.
Yes.
Trustee Mao.
No.
Trustee Churchill.
Yes.
Item 4 is a motion to authorize participation in the national opioid settlement and to direct the village manager to execute any and all documents on behalf of the village necessary to participate in the settlement.
Hold on. Which?
It's a motion.
It's just a motion.
Original type.
Would somebody like to make
Actually,
that
if you want to
motion?
see the motion, it's on
I'll make that motion.
Word doc.
Trustee Gerger's made a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Charo. Is there any discussion?
What would all the documents and stuff that, since this is essentially removing the board from signing documents or seeing this information?
As described on the attachment that was on board.
There was no
There's no
attachment.
attachment on board docs.
Could you go to number 4, please, Dan?
If you click on it.
4?
No attachment.
This one?
Scroll down. Did it not come through? Number
4, yeah, 4.
Roll down all this. Keep going.
Do you want
So
to
this
see
is-
my iPad?
Yeah, this is a national settlement.
Yeah, and it's, like you can see on Dewey, that it's not there.
Essentially,
That thing.
it's executive because it came from the Attorney General.
Yeah.
It's not on the public-facing side. This is a letter from the Attorney General. This is essentially, and correct me if I give the wrong legal scenario, essentially it's a class action lawsuit filed by multiple attorneys general across the nation. They've reached a spot where they have a settlement. We are included in the class by the nature of being a municipality and entitled to our formulatic share of the proceeds from this. This just says you have to opt in to the Attorney's General settlement.
Okay.
And that's what this is.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item 5 is a motion to approve a water bill adjustment for 1124 Oakbrook. I think this came via utility committee meeting.
I can kind of explain this. Water main broke. Normally, you're just going to have a little hole in your yard. They throw some seed on it. Everything looks good. Well, when Dustin and crew got into doing this, they found that they had done a water main under the driveway and took a turn. So he's like, there must have been a dumpster there at some point. So they tore up this 80-year-old lady's yard pretty good and then put the access where it should be as well. They hired Pedigo to come back in and put her yard back together because it was a mess. And we're just paying her for, Dustin looked at her usage. we're paying for her water to get the grass back to where it was. And the utility committee did make a recommendation to bring this forward and unanimously and not have this count as her leak adjustment. So, we have in the ordinance, the leak adjustment, this wouldn't count. So if she did have a leak within 3 years, she could still come back before it because it was due to us. IV3 cut it, but IV3 cut it because it couldn't be located because it went where it shouldn't have been. So that was a recommendation.
Can I summarize your motion?
Yes.
Is to provide the credit absent a leak adjustment policy.
Perfect. Exactly what
For the cost of water to restore lawn.
Mayor Kimsey said. Sounds
Brett's
good.
made a motion. Trustee Gerger's made a motion. Of a second.
Second.
Second by Trustee Churchill. Aye. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 6 is an ordinance amending the village code to amend the definition of quorum.
I'll make a motion to deny.
Absent even an introduction, is there a second?
I'd like to hear the introduction.
You would what?
I'd like to hear the introduction. Can we, don't we discuss
Sure. Yeah.
that after? So, sure, I'll
absolutely.
second to begin.
I'm just trying the motion to get the discussion going.
Okay, so at the last meeting, we faced a potential of an issue where we weren't going to establish a quorum based on our definition. Attorney Mordock noted that and has noted that there is a difference in the way that the village defines a quorum from what the Illinois Municipal Code defines as a quorum. And has made the suggestion to mirror the Illinois Municipal Code to allow the village to avoid the potential of not being able to conduct its business.
So the case last week, what the code I found, Mr. Mordak is going to try to locate, it said you had to have 2/3 of the elected trustees, so that would not include the mayor, if you were waiving the bid process, which is what we were in effect doing, purchasing that. So when there was only 4 of us here, if all 4 of us don't vote yes, then it wouldn't pass because you need 2/3 of the elected trustees is what I read, but
No, I think you're cross-referencing two things. This was just purely the definition of what establishes a quorum to even open a meeting.
Oh, okay.
Period. That's just to
But
So this won't affect voting in any way?
it would.
Can I?
Go ahead,
Can I
Attorney.
answer it? Because it affects voting in one specific scenario, and that would be currently, that would be that we could hold a vote with 3 trustees and the mayor present. Now, currently we could not do that, at least in my opinion, the way I interpret the code, because it requires a quorum requires a majority of trustees.
Which would be 4 of us.
Right. It would not change any of the voting requirement language. It would not alter any of the language set out by state statute. What it would allow us to do, though, is conduct a meeting with 3 trustees and the village president. Any spending would need to be approved unanimously at that meeting, because spending or any ordinance would need to be approved unanimously, because that requires a majority of corporate authorities. Likewise, any spending would need to be approved by 4 individuals still. So it doesn't change those voting requirements, wouldn't change any language. For example, overturning a zoning board of appeals recommendation is a 2/3 vote. It would not change that in any way.
Greg, with the new ordinance that's proposed and on board docs, if we were to approve this, if there was a vote, if there's 4 trustees here, there's a quorum present with the village president, and there is a 2-2 under the new quorum vote, then this would be approved with the mayor breaking the tie, right?
And getting us to the 4 votes.
And so you'd have 2-2, and then
Well, it wouldn't even get to,
if you have 4 trustees here and it's 2 yes, 2 no, so there's a tie. The village president breaks the tie at 3, that motion would carry, correct?
A motion not creating liability against the village would carry. An ordinance would not carry. And a motion to, and we don't do motions like this, but a motion to approve the purchase of a vehicle instead of a
Or
resolution.
waive the bid process would still require.
That would fail. That would fail.
But there would still be motions that would carry in an instance with a 2-2 and a mayor breaking a tie.
Yeah, for example, a motion to approve the dog park rules.
Okay, so, and that's a great example, because in my view, as being a representative body, and we all are American and believe in democracy, I believe, I just don't think that's very representative of who we're all elected to represent if you only have 2 trustees approving something. I just don't think that's very good policy making for body. I think it's bad policy.
And I was just drafting this to put it in accordance with the municipal.
I'm just saying, in that instance, I think that sends a very bad signal for the village of Chatham that you can have something potentially passed with just 2 trustees. I don't think it's representative.
So in the scenario that you're describing, under our current quorum definition, it requires 4 trustees to be here.
Right.
If there's not 4 trustees, you can't even begin to conduct business.
Right.
So at that point, the only thing you can pass is essentially a resolution with 3 votes. That's it. It takes 4 votes to pass anything that creates a liability, any kind of expenditure.
But 4 votes.
The risk that potentially presented itself in that is, while we all recognize everybody has lives and has obligations outside of this board,
right,
it is also incumbent on the board to make sure that we're able to conduct business out here. What your attorney recognized is the definition of quorum as it exists in our code differs from what the definition of quorum is in the Illinois Municipal Code. And in the Illinois Municipal Code, it says this is what a majority of the corporate authorities can create business. It changes no other voting requirements, counts on anything.
But you could have passed a dog park with 2 trustee votes.
And maybe I can clarify, because that scenario can happen under the way our code is drafted right now.
Okay, could you explain that? What the difference is?
So if you and Brett and Dewey and Kristen and the mayor were here, we would have a quorum.
So 4 trustees.
4 trustees, so we have a majority of trustees, so we have a quorum.
Yep.
And if you vote for the dog park ordinance and you vote for the resolution, or not an ordinance, resolution, and Dewey says, no, I don't like those rules, and Kristen says, no, let the dogs run around, then you have a 2-2 vote.
Okay.
The mayor can break that tie, and if he votes to approve, votes with you guys, then the resolution or the motion would carry.
It would carry under current ordinance?
Under your current ordinance.
Okay.
Because this ordinance only affect.
I thought we needed 4 yeas.
No, only if it's an ordinance or you're spending.
So let's say scenario, we're buying something that's $250,000. We have the 4, just like you, and 3 say yes and 1 says no. Then Mayor Kimsey can become the 4th?
Yes. And that's,
as we currently sit?
Yes.
Okay.
And that would not change under this quorum either, because if you have, say you have 3 in Mayor Kimsey, and
I wanted to say there's 3 scenarios where it says it's got to be 2/3 of the elected trustees.
There's several, and I'd be happy to provide them.
Because it's changing it from, to Trustee Gerger's point, from of the trustees to the corporate authority, which is including the mayor, right?
Only for the quorum, not for voting. And the state statute puts out, when it's 2/3 vote, there's certain scenarios that there. Sometimes it says corporate authorities.
Right.
Sometimes it says
elected
officials. Sometimes it says elected officials then holding office, which would be different, because if you have a vacancy, that reduces the number.
But this doesn't change that.
Just
This
the
just
ability to start
allows
a
us to
meeting.
start a meeting.
My concern, just for the board, there's limited checks and balances and oversight authority that the board has just in general. And my fear of making that change in language just reduces that ability of this board to provide checks and balances. That's my fear.
Okay. Trustee Churchill has a motion to deny this ordinance. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
I would like,
Dewey, very second.
yes, Dewey. Again, for the people in the bad seats, this doesn't change voting in any way other than the essentially insignificant votes that don't require money or liability. Right? In those cases, it could theoretically change how the voting occurs.
Because I think we took a vote last week that probably shouldn't have passed because it should have required 4 trustees to say yes.
Should have taken one more vote.
That was.
Well, I don't think you could break it. I think it was to waive
You could
bids.
have broken it, even under our ordinance.
But the waiving of bids says it's 2/3 of elected trustees if you're going to waive the bids.
I would need to find that
Right.
in our code.
Right.
That's right. But, okay, so I've seconded Paul's motion so that we could take a vote. But if this only affects the beginning of a meeting, then I'm fine to allow.
Yeah. So here's my description. Say, and we've had this come up before. Christmas Eve, we had a meeting that was just to approve the warrants. The warrants took 4 votes. If for some reason Matt and Meredith and Kristen had left town, weren't available, or as the last 18 months, 20 months has shown us, were quarantined, unavailable, otherwise couldn't be here tonight. The board couldn't even open that meeting in a fashion to consider those warrants. Now, once you get to that spot, it would still require the 3 trustees plus a 4th vote, which would be the mayor, to actually approve that. If one said no, it's done, because that's a spending of money. So it still takes 4 votes to get any liability or spending of public funds there.
Including warrants.
Including the warrants.
Yep.
Understood.
So the concern is, you don't want to do anything that increases the likelihood that the village can't conduct its business in some fashion. And that was what the attorney noted in that, and that's what drives this. It's the ability to open a meeting and conduct it. It changes no.
We can make it more strict. We can't make
So it still allows the village to do business if,
yeah.
I'll be at the meeting.
The board waives it. So you'll see in the
so a no would be in support of the change.
waive the bidding requirement.
So
Motion to strike it down.
is there, okay, is there any further discussion?
Anything over 20,000, isn't it?
Is there any further discussion on this? So again, if you vote yes, you're voting against changing that definition.
Against council's recommendation, okay.
A yes would be to not change it. No. Mr. Brown.
Trustee Churchill.
Yes.
Trustee Gerger.
Yes.
Trustee Detmers. No.
Yeah.
Trustee Charo.
No.
Trustee Ferguson.
No.
Trustee Mao.
No.
Right, so to switch this and get into the affirmative, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make that
For
motion.
the
Second.
Trustee Miles made a motion. Trustee Charo has made a second. Mr. Clerk.
Trustee Mao.
Yes.
Trustee Ferguson.
Yes.
Trustee Charo.
Yes.
Trustee Detmers.
Yes.
Trustee Gerger.
No.
Trustee Churchill.
No.
Item 7 is a resolution approving the purchase of a mini excavator.
I'll make that motion.
Trustee Miles made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
This is authorizing a purchase of mini excavator in the price of $59,902.15. Any discussion?
Yeah, the only thing I would say on discussion, I've talked to Attorney Mordock is the bidding process, and if it's over 20,000, we do have to go out for bid. We did, and we use a state site, which I think is okay. It's not that I'm not saying, but we may want to look at amending our ordinance, and I've talked to Attorney Mordock to clean our ordinance up to where we don't even have to think about this. We know it went through Sourcewell or it went through UBID, the state agency that does the bids as well, just for the future. And I'll work with Attorney Mordock on that.
Could we please add that? Could we please add that to the next committee of the whole agenda?
Yeah, we can do that.
I make a motion to table or remove my motion to approve, or?
I think we can entertain a motion to approve this, what it was used, how the bids were solicited, but what's provided is there are state negotiated contracts with vendors for supplies that many state agencies and many municipalities use. And that is accepted as bidded on the state level. So it's a process we have used before. I think what Trustee Gerger is just clearing up, that it's a process that's valuable out there because the state goes and essentially leverages their buying power to our benefit in doing these procurement lists.
And there's so many different vendors that are parts of it. You can still buy stuff in your local area and still be able to get the benefit of this state price.
Yeah. So I think it is appropriate to ask for a motion to approve, which we have in a second.
And we discussed this in the budgetary process. I remember talking about an excavator and a skid steer or bobcat.
Came in under what we had budgeted.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Clerk.
Trustee Charo.
Yes.
Trustee Detmers.
Yes.
Trustee Ferguson.
Yes.
Trustee Gerger.
Yes.
Trustee Mao.
Yes.
Item 8 is a resolution approving the purchase of a Bobcat compact tractor loader in the amount of $57,717.77.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Trustee Mao, second by Trustee Charo. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Clerk.
Trustee Detmers.
Yes.
Trustee Ferguson.
Yes.
Trustee Gerger.
Yes.
Trustee Mao.
Yes.
Trustee Charo.
Yes.
Item 9 is a resolution approving the purchase of 3 vehicles for use by the Village Police Department. We have a motion to bring this to the floor.
I'll make that motion.
Trustee Mao has made a motion. To have a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Charo. Is there any discussion?
In the future, I wouldn't mind having this stuff discussed at the committee of the whole, because I know Vern, when he tried to get vehicles from us last budget or 2 budgets, he gave us a nice sheet that showed all the vehicles, their mileage, where they're at. I know we're further down the road now, but it'd be nice to discuss that. We're looking at spending $400,000 here tonight, and we haven't discussed this in an open meeting at all. And it's not just Vern, it's for the excavator and all of them. It'd be nice if we'd had a discussion, but I'm okay with it because we hired 2 new officers and that, but in the future, it'd be great if we had this at the committee of the whole to start and not get this on Friday and then have to approve it on Tuesday without discussing it at all.
I necessarily don't disagree with that, but you also do approve the budget, which allows the person.
But we didn't, so that's, the mayor said you don't have to, this is just approving the budget, not approving anything in it. And so that's why, because we had concerns and we weren't allowed to discuss them about the budget because we had to pass it that night and you can't have that discussion. And so that's what you said.
Oh, this is the appropriate spot. And
yeah,
like you say, we're in a spot where that becomes the guidance on what they're going to do. They're going to go out.
I'm just saying in the future, it'd be nice for all these things, not just the police, it's the streets, the, water,
Some of it goes to the earlier concern. We have 1 committee of whole meeting a month.
Right.
Sometimes there's timing, sometimes there's risks associated with deferring things.
Understand.
Availability is a big concern at this point in time right now. So yes, this is budgetary plan. It does take the ultimate approval with the board because of the amount that has to be there. So that's why it's in front of you.
Understand.
My only comment, I actually reached out to Vern just to clarify, but there's actually a charge on here for the police upfit for 3 vehicles for $32,508. If you look at the quote below, it should be $10,116 per. So it seems as though they've overcharged us by $21.60. And so when I just reached out to Vern just to understand, maybe was there something else occurring that was causing that variance? And I just wanted to share that with the board, and I think he had tried to look into that. So.
No, the reason why, I explained to Dewey, is the fact is that as you look at the ordinance in front of you, it's for I believe for the 122,000, which gives us a little flexibility of like $500 or $700 with 3 vehicles. The upfit charge, as far as what Dewey pointed out, the $2,000, is the fact is that it depends on the upfit charge. If you look at the bid from, which is part of the Dodge dealership and central services, it's for $1,135, which is a half cage in each vehicle. Now, if we go with the half cage, it's that price. If we go with the full cage, it's not an upcharge, it's more expensive.
Right.
So therefore, that's why you see that difference. As far as what's being, that specific amount, the 32,508, it could be 32,000 less than 508. And I know it's going to be for right now because we have an extra cage that we're going to be able to utilize, which will subtract out minimum $1,500. So that's not going to be exactly that, but it's going to be pretty darn close to it.
We've asked Greg to give us some flexibility in some of these bids because in Vern's case, what do you think? 6 months? Longer?
I asked 4 months ago. I placed it, basically, I spoke to the dealership, and this is 4 months ago. I put this on as far as trying to purchase a vehicle. And that's because everyone knows there's a chip shortage. Well, he's already told me that I might be lucky to see these vehicles not until January 2022. So this has been kind of an ongoing process, and it could change the price a little bit, but in this case here, what we're asking for is a little bit of leeway when it comes to I think if you look at the bid, I asked for the total price $122,260. I asked for $122 to be approved just in case there's a little bit of fluctuation there, just a little bit of wiggle room. We're not talking thousands. It does not.
Not that I saw. Again, I'm not trying to slow this down in any means. I just noticed that variance. I wanted to call it out for any other trustees that might have noticed it.
We wanted to point out that on some of those, we put flexibility. Now, we were talking about the Bobcat and the excavator.
Right.
I think those are in stock. But
Yes, the
cars,
vehicles.
Understand.
I was told originally that the cars would be here by the trucks should be here by December. That's what the dealership told me. But obviously, you guys ran into that same scenario.
It's not a government.
A water vehicle before for the same scenario. It's a shortage and it's supposed to be here now. I was told it's supposed to be here by the end of December. I don't know. I'll hold my breath, I guess.
Can I ask why we went trucks instead of cars, just for pure knowledge?
Yeah, that's no problem. Originally, I was given a budget. The budget was given me was $120,000 for purchase of vehicles. So I looked at the Dodge pickups, which you see the price is $30,596. The Ford Explorers, which we have some of our fleet, the Explorers currently start out at $35,000, so that's a base price. So that's the problem I run into is, yes, I could buy Fords and purchase 2 of them and then outfit them to, as well as I could, or go with the pickups, which we do have right now currently 3 Dodge pickups in the fleet, to be able to purchase 3 vehicles because my fleet is aging and with the mileage and everything else. So that's the reason why I went with the pickups.
I was just curious about, thank you.
Also, with the pickups, we want you to understand, and with the Explorers, what you will see and what I've found is, you read a bunch of studies, is that officers are less apt to be, not necessarily injured, but the fact is that they're stepping up into a vehicle as opposed to stepping down into a vehicle. Now, it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you do it for 20 plus years, it's going to take you a while.
Well, yeah.
No doubt about it.
and Ford doesn't make any sedans anymore.
No more
So
Ford
the
sedans.
only car that would be available would be the Dodge Charger.
Correct.
So,
And the Dodge Charger actually was more than the Dodge pickup.
Oh, what about, yeah.
So.
Thank
It's
you for
better to
explaining
have
that.
It's better to have the trucks too, because winter time and other weather issues.
Exactly.
I take it as a
Further
four-wheel
discussion?
drive.
Mr. Clerk.
Trustee Mao.
Yes.
Trustee Gerger.
Yes.
Trustee Ferguson.
Yes.
Trustee Detmers.
Yes.
Trustee Charo.
Yes.
Item 10 is a resolution approving the purchase of police radios.
And for the record, Vern, I knew your list wasn't going to get younger. It was going to be much worse in a year and a
I
half.
appreciate that. If you need an explanation on the radios, we're currently, the Motorola radios we're currently carrying are 11 years old. Technology's obviously progressed since that time. We're having a lot of issues, a lot of breakdowns with our current radios. Our communication, that's our lifeline, those are radios. So,
I learned one
I'll
thing.
make that motion.
Second.
I want to get in a radio.
I do have a question for,
Hang on, we have a motion by trustee Miles, second by trustee Charo. Further discussion?
yes, okay. So, and I know I ask this question a lot, but I know there's, money floating out there. Is there money, grant money to help us with things like this with the radios, or is there not?
there is grants, we've applied for grants in the past. Unfortunately, we don't meet those requirements. We're typically runs off of, it's a DOJ grant, typically runs, not all the time, but,
We took his vehicle.
and such.
Yeah. Well, I know the bad thing about Chatham sometimes is sometimes we're too big, sometimes we're too small, and there's not a lot of money in the middle. And so that's the bad part.
All right.
Well, they do apply. We've seen grants on things like bulletproof vest seems to be a recurring one that we get some kind of assistance on funding. So they do watch and they do apply.
IDOT grants.
Yeah. So, further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Clerk.
Trustee Detmers.
Yes.
Trustee Gerger.
Yes.
Trustee Charo.
Yes.
Trustee Ferguson.
Yes.
Trustee Mao.
Yes.
All right, and the item that we should have the far and above the most discussion and debate about tonight, entertain a motion to bring the resolution recommending trick-or-treating hours to the floor.
I'll make that motion, but
Second.
Facebook has already told us what our hours are. I'm like, no, we vote tonight.
To be honest, I thought we had already done this, and when I saw it on the agenda, I'm like, I felt it.
I put it on the village webpage and I gave it to Clarion and said, this is tentative. Until Tuesday night.
We're pretty much, we have a strong history of
I'll make the motion.
recognizing the holidays on the day the holiday is. Trustee Gerge made motion, second.
Second.
Second by trustee Charo, all in favor.
Aye.
4:30 to 8 o'clock is the recommended trick-or-treating hours. If you're looking for any guidance from IDPH or Sangamon County Department of Public Health, it's also attached in the full of it and also probably widely available on it. Those who wish to participate recommended to turn their street light or their front porch light on.
Dewey will be out till 8:20.
I read the guidance. I'm going to follow the rules.
Is there any public comment regarding village business?
I have a question.
Yes, Darlene.
They put the broadband in. Well, their equipment was parked at the dead-end street there by my house.
Okay.
The farmer came to plow the field behind the house. The equipment from broadband was in the way for the tractor to get into the field. So he went through our yard.
Oh.
Who's responsible for that?
The farmer.
Farmer.
Though getting the farmer to get blamed for anything is almost impossible.
Anyway, I will leave this for a conversation that I would recommend that you have with our chief of police.
Do you know who the farmer was?
I don't know who farmer.
I don't think
used to know.
I think this is probably best to address that with the chief.
Detective Travis Shaw.
So, all right, any additional public comment? Hearing none, scheduled meetings is printed on the agenda. I will entertain a motion to move to closed session under personnel at 2C1, collective negotiating at 2C2, setting the price for sale of public property at 2C6, and purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body at 2C5.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Trustee Chalmers made a motion, second by trustee Mao. Mr. Clerk, would you take a roll?
Trustee Mao.
Yes.
Trustee Ferguson.
Yes.
Trustee Charo.
Yes.
Trustee Detmers.
Yes.
Trustee Gerger.
Yeah.
Any action afterwards?
There would be no action. There's no action to be taken after the executive session.
All right, I'm going to stop the meeting.